Hello and welcome to Icanplanet.com. I'm Matthew Stevens, and thank you very much for spending the time to tune in with us tonight. Today we have an incredible scholar on board with us, Michael Tsarion. He's a preeminent researcher and independent scholar of the highest calibre in the subjects of the Arcane Mysteries and the occult history of the world. He has written several books and has produced DVDs, The Architects of Control, and also the fantastic series Origins and Oracles, all of which are available from his website, michaeltsarion.com. Michael, it's a great pleasure of mine to have you with us. Welcome to the show, mate.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Matthew, and thanks for inviting me.
No problem. Akhenaton, Michael, first of all, can we start with a bit of background on him? In terms of kind of his heritage, who he was, and when it was that he reigned and whatnot.
Well, he was reigning about 1400 years BC in what Egyptologists refer to as the 18th dynasty. Okay. And he was the husband of Nefertiti. He was he was in the line of the Thutmose pharaohs. His real name was Amenhotep IV, and that meant that his father was Amenhotep III. His mother was Queen Tai, and allegedly his son was Tutankhamun. Almost everything I'm saying is somewhat open to future rectification because people know so little about these details. A lot of people have thought, for instance, that Tutankhamun may have been his brother and all of this kind of thing.
Right.
So again, everything is subject to revision as time goes by. His uncle was the famous Aya, who became a pharaoh at a later date, you see. And it's his grandparents that were extremely important in the history of that period. Again, I say Queen Tai and or Yuya, that a lot of people think is the biblical Joseph. So him and his family basically were very important, but the most important thing that jumps out is that he was the man who decided to change the theology of Egypt, and really to do it radically. And it didn't just mean introducing another church or another theology, which had been done a lot. Egypt was a very egalitarian country and very permissive when it came to worships of gods and religions. They were pantheistic. And therefore it would have been very easy for him to set up a sun cult. There already was several sun cults, some of them almost identical to the one that he subsequently created, which was Atonism. It's very similar to what was taught in Heliopolis. And in fact, I tend to believe that he either was himself a priest of Heliopolis, or these priests in Heliopolis, these priests of the sun, a faction of them were behind him. It wasn't just him alone.
Right.
He was actually working with particular, cults. Mm. But instead of doing that, instead of just adding another cult to what was there already, he established his church and then mercilessly and ruthlessly suppressed every other belief system in Egypt. And then this, of course, constituted not only a change in the history of Egypt as a country, it actually impacted the history of the world. And we cannot understand the days we're living in today unless we understand his changes. People can either believe me, that it was a terrible, terrible travesty, or like 98% of the rest of the scholars of the world, they all believe it was a good thing. He's considered the Christ before the Christ, the light, the holy light, an inspired leader, a great man who tried to get rid of all this evil paganism. Most people think of him as the great Sun King of Egypt, who was sort of a precursor to the creator of monotheism, and certainly a precursor to even the Christian Judaic kind of monotheism, all of this nonsense. Mm. He's looked at as in a very, very he's lionized. He's looked at it in a very positive way. I'm one of two scholars in the world that really doesn't take that attitude at all.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. I have looked at a little bit of your research on this and listened to previous interviews with Henrik Palmgren, And you went a little bit into the actual cult of light itself and the fact that it's deeply rooted in the metaphysical world as well also, Michael.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, that has to be stated every time that there was no flippancy in the creation of these cults. Atonism, even though it was an aberration, as I said, it had roots in much earlier traditions. In fact, the name Aton does precede Akhenaton. One of his fathers, I think 3 generations back or 2 generations, I really can't remember, one of his grandfathers worshipped Aton. What we have to understand about Egypt is that Egypt's life was very much, the life of the Egyptian people and the priest was very much divided into the secular world and the world of the priests, the hieratic.
Right.
And what that meant was that you had tutelary deities, gods, goddesses, and deities that were commonly worshipped by the masses of people, in the same way that all religion has. Judaism has an esoteric hidden side that only the priests, it's called the Kabbalistic schools, they acknowledge. Any rabbi will openly acknowledge that they have that as one of the 5th secret levels, whereas they have lower levels for the ordinary person to matriculate. And so this division between the public worship, at that time the god Amun-Ra was the public god. All Egyptians worshipped Amun-Ra. This was just accepted. However, different families and different priests and different individuals could have what was known as a private god. They could have a private worship of their particular chosen god. This was accepted. This was no problem.
Really?
And yeah, so Aton was one of many, many gods that was worshipped in private, as I said, by at least one of Akhenaton's ancestors, predecessors, probably worshipped by certain coterie in a private way, not public. And what Akhenaton did is decided, look, I'm done with Ra, I'm done with Amun. We're going to end all of this, and we're going to make our private family god the main god of the entire country. Now, people were just going boogaloo about this because it had never happened before. It was an act of unbelievable, unmitigated tyranny, of suppression which the likes Egypt had never known, couldn't grasp at all, and really didn't know what to do with. And they couldn't also believe, you see, because the pharaoh ostensibly is meant to be the high priest of the country. He's meant to be in tune with what the psyche of the country is. He's their head boy. He's their head man. He's their link between God and them. So they had an additional problem of wondering what in the hell is wrong with this guy who is so out of tune with us that he's treating us as foreign. And of course, this led some scholars to believe, including myself, that that's because Akhenaton himself was foreign. He treated the Egyptian people in this despicable way because he himself was not truly of Egyptian blood. As I say, this is not 100% provable, but the treatment of Egypt and various other things in his life, like where he spent his youth, for instance, that would correspond to what in the Bible is called the land of Goshen. I believe it's the eastern delta. Don't quote me on that, but I'm pretty sure it's the eastern delta is where he spent his time, close to cities that were occupied by what would now be called the Hebrews or the proto-Jews.
Right.
And so he grew up amongst these people. There's speculation that these grandparents I'm speaking about were full-blown Jews, and therefore there's a rumor, there's several pieces of evidence that lead people to believe that he really wasn't of the Egyptian blood. And I deal with that in the book, and we go into that theory, and see where that kind of leads. It would answer a lot of questions. It would answer a lot.
Yeah, I mean,